Burroughs wrote a whole cycle of novels set in the Hollow Earth. Verne, Burroughs, and a lot of other writers of science fiction were inspired by the theories of an early 19th century American eccentric named John Cleves Sims. Like Halley, Sims thought the Earth was made up of 5 concentric spheres. But he added a new wrinkle. There was a huge opening, popularly called Sims Hole, at each of the poles. The ocean flowed in and out of these openings. The interior of the Earth was also supposed to be inhabited. Sims, an army captain who had served with distinction in the War of 182-1, was an enthusiastic evangelist for his theory. He traveled around the country trying to raise money to send an expedition to the North Polar Hole. He even petitioned Congress for money to finance the expedition, and the proposal garnered 25 votes. A rich doctor financed an 1824 expedition to the South Pole to find the Sims Hole. The expedition was unsuccessful, but Sims died with his idea intact, and a stone model of the Hollow Earth according to Sims sits atop a memorial raised to him by his son at Hamilton, Ohio. In 1906, William Reed published a book called Phantom of the Poles in which he stated, "I am able to prove my theory that the Earth is not only hollow, but suitable in its interior to sustain human life with as little discomfort as on its exterior, and can be made accessible to mankind with 1/4 the outlay of money, time and life that it costs to build the subway in New York City. The number of people who can settle in this new world, if not already occupied, will be billions." Reed's startling proposal received scant attention from a skeptical public. Somewhat more influential was Marshall B. Gardner, who wrote about Sims' theory a few years later. Gardner rejected the absurd Sims notion of 5 concentric spheres, but he enthusiastically adopted the idea of openings at the poles. According to Gardner, the interior of the Earth was lighted by a small sun about 600 miles in diameter. Unfortunately for Gardner, he published his book in 1920. In 1926, Admiral Richard E. Byrd made his first flight over the North Pole, and in 1929 he performed the same feat at the South Pole. As history records, Admiral Byrd did not find any gaping holes. Since the holes were supposed to be over 1,000 miles in diameter, they would have been pretty hard to overlook. Gardner did not abandon his Hollow Earth ideas, but he did stop lecturing and writing about them. However, others who have kept the faith have insisted that Byrd actually did discover the big hole at the pole and actually flew a good way into the interior of the Earth, and that for some obscure mean the government is covering up this fact. Some Hollow Earthers insist that on later expeditions Byrd actually penetrated some 4,000 miles into the interior of the Hollow Earth. Satellite photograph has presented Hollow Earthers with another problem. None of the photographs of the Earth taken from space show polar holes. But the Hollow Earthers are not about to be put down by such evidence. It's all part of the cover, they say. The satellite photos are all retouched to hide the hole. Actually, Sonic of the early photos of the Earth from space did show what appeared to be a gigantic hole at one pole. The pictures, however, were composites made up of many smaller photos. The hole was simply an area that had not been photographed. Nonsense, insist the Hollow Earthers. These were the real photos that slipped through the web of censorship by accident. As with the Byrd expedition, these polar hole photos have become pillars of the Hollow Earth faith. An odd champion of the Hollow Earth was Richard S. Shaver, a Pennsylvania welder who claimed that by racial memory he had reclaimed all of man's forgotten history. His tales included accounts of evil creatures called bears who lived in huge subterranean caverns that honeycombed the Earth. There is also a vast body of occult speculation about a huge underground civilization known as Agartha. It is supposed to be the of hidden masters whose powers range from the merely supernatural to the absolutely godlike. More bizarre even in the theories of Sims and Gardner was the one put forth by Cyrus Reed Teague, an herb doctor and alchemist from Utica, New York. Teague held that the scientists had gotten it all backward, and that the Earth was hollow and we are living on the inside. Source 5. Hollow Earth in the Puranics. The Puranists make several comments in relation to the Hollow Earth which should not be taken lightly. Although they are but comments in passing, their significance should be recognized. One such Puranic comment has to do with the narration of the Kali Avatar that at the end of Kali Yuga, the Kali Avatar will be born in the best of Brahmin families of the city of Shambhala to annihilate miscreants on the surface of the globe. Afterwards, the general Puranic version goes that Vedic culture will be resettled on the surface of the Earth from the interior of the planet. It is noteworthy that Shambhala is depicted in the Puranas as a city of the planet's interior. Not only in the Puranas, but in Tibetan collective memory also, Shambhala is deemed to be a city in the Earth's interior. There are other prominent Puranic stories which openly make reference to the hollow portion of the Earth, such as the one relating to the Avatar Parashurama, and may be found in the 9th canto, 16th chapter, texts 19-21, of the Bhagavatam Purana. The 19th text says that he confronted the warrior caste 21 times and banished them to the face of the Earth. The word Prithivan was used to indicate the face of the Earth. Then it is explained that Parashurama distributed the 8 points of the compass to certain rishis. This only makes sense, as he was rather disgusted with the warrior caste. Rishis are different than warriors. Of course they are members of the priestly caste. For example, they are tolerant, intellectual, they practice goodness, etc. After mentioning the 8 points of the compass and the rishis who received lordship over these areas, the Madhyayata, the middle portion, was then mentioned. The Bhagavad Purana says that the middle portion was distributed to Kashyapa Rishi. So, while adopting a descriptive tone of narration, and after having mentioned the surface or the face of the world, the Bhagavad Purana went on to contrast by mentioning the middle portion, practically in the same breath. The wording and storyline of this narration about the Avatar Parashurama is directly indicative of the Hollow Earth theory. And yet another is the story of the sons of Maharaj Sagara. It seems that Indra had stolen the sacrificial horse meant for the Ashvamedha sacrifice, a type of fire sacrifice. As the story goes, the sons of Sagara went searching after the horse and came to a northern ocean, which they traveled over, and entered into the interior of the earth. There, they found the horse at the hermitage of Kapila Rishi. The sons of Sagara manhandled the Rishi, even though he swore that it wasn't him who had stolen the horse. What can we conclude from this story? Well, first of all, because they manhandled a rishi, we can conclude that the sons of Maharaj Sagara were a rough bunch indeed. On a more serious note, though, a correspondence exists in that Hollow Earth investigators indicate the existence of openings near the polar areas of this planet, and support such allegations with various evidences, for example, polar anomalies such as warming. This would account for having to cross a northern ocean in order to enter into the interior of the planet. The Bhagavad Purana doesn't go into as much description as other Puranas do. The Bhagavad just says that the sons of Sagara went in the northeast direction. From what exact point we don't really know. But even this statement seems to confirm the placement of the opening by Hollow Earth investigators, who place it in the Arctic Ocean between Ellesmere Island and the Russian peninsula Severnaya Zemlya. Another noteworthy point to be gleaned from this narration is that Vedic culture existed in the Hollow Earth, as none other than Kapila Rishi had his hermitage there. How congruent with the descriptions given by Olaf Jansen, the Norwegian youth who claimed to have wandered into the opening with his father on their sailboat. Olaf described a human society which seemed to correspond to Puranic descriptions from before the start of the Kali Yuga. He described humans being 12 to 14 feet tall, with lifespans of almost 1,000 years, photographic memories, who spoke Sanskrit and worshipped the sun, albeit the interior sun. An obvious question arises, however, why don't the Puranas just come out and explain to us about the Hollow Earth, then? Well, remember that these Puranas were originally compiled at the juncture between two yugas, before the effects of the Kali Yuga, such as forgetfulness and ignorance, had completely come to manifest. Maybe it is for this reason that the Puranas speak of the Hollow Earth in such a way that they assume people naturally know about it, and therefore don't offer any special explanations. By way of analogy, if a writer were to narrate the story of the deciding battle of the American Revolution, the Battle of Yorktown, he or she might explain that the French cut off any possible retreat by the British by way of sea, and then the writer would probably go on with the story. But the writer would assume that the reader knows who the French are and that they come from the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, and that such an ocean indeed exists. It would not occur to the writer to try to explain and substantiate the existence of the French people or of the ocean in the middle of the narration, obviously. It seems that, similarly, the Puranas simply mention the bowels of the earth and Kapila Rishi's hermitage there in the course of their narrations, without offering any special explanations. But the Puranic evidence is actually of much interest to the adherents of the Hollow Earth theory. It actually constitutes a landmark addition to the body of Hollow Earth evidence. This is interesting, because the Tibetan lore referring to the Hollow Earth became popularized among the proponents of the theory a long time ago, even spawning a major motion picture production entitled Shangri-La in the 1930s, which was redone in the 70s. Maybe this was due to the impact of a book written by Nicholas Roerich entitled simply Shambhala, which was published in 1930. He had traveled in Tibet and related the rich Hollow Earth folklore in his book, which mentions the cities of Shambhala, Shangri-La, and the Kingdom of Agartha. Quite possibly the Tibetan Hollow Earth collective memory has been better conserved because of the tunnels that are said to run between Agartha and Tibet. It is possible that the Tibetans received influence from the Hollow Earth for a longer period of time for this reason. The Puranic Hollow Earth content hasn't been much recognized, because we in the West have always experienced the Puranas through the filter of westernized Indologists, who weren't much aware of Hollow Earth folklore, nor were they exactly looking for clues about the true geological configuration of our planet, as they went about their studies of the Vedic literature. These comments about the Hollow Earth must have passed them by, as did a lot of comments in the Vedic literature. When the British first studied the Vedic literature after their invasion into India 200 years ago, they noticed comments about things such as aircraft, divinus, arrows and discs which were able to pursue fleeing targets, weapons born of mantras, as well as beings from other planets with incredible lifespans who were identified as the progenitors of humanity. Well, the British naturally disregarded such comments as poppycock. But now we have seen some of these things come true. We have seen the advent of flight, guided missiles and voice-activated weapons. Thus it might behoove followers of Vedic Dharma to revisit the Puranic narrations with a wide-angle lens. These comments about the bowels of the earth, the hermitage of Kapila Rishi, the Parashurama avatar and about Shambhala certainly merit specific focus. Source 6. The Aryan invasion theory has been a basis and justification of Western interpretation upon the civilization and history of India. Although many Indologists within India have been influenced by such thought, the theory has not met majority acceptance within India and is even coming under attack in the West. David Frawley, one Sanskrit scholar recognized both inside as well as outside of India, has assessed the current situation of the Aryan invasion theory thusly. One of the main ideas used to interpret and generally devalue the ancient history of India is the theory of the Aryan invasion. According to this account, India was invaded and conquered by nomadic light-skinned Indo-European tribes from Central Asia around 1500 to 100 BC, who overthrew an earlier and more advanced dark-skinned Dravidian civilization from which they took most of what later became Hindu culture. Ellipsis points this idea totally foreign to the history of India, whether north or south, has become an almost unquestioned truth in the interpretation of ancient history today. Today, after nearly all the reasons for its supposed validity have been refuted, even major Western scholars are at last beginning to call it into question. David Frawley, The Myth of the Aryan Invasion. One main reason that the theory has been called into question is that there is no primary evidence. No monuments to any heroes of such invasions have been excavated, no related cemeteries unearthed, no battlefields identified in relation to the theory, no forts, in short nothing in the way of physical evidence. There is a host of other incongruencies, but this is the general idea. One major platform that Western scholars have relied upon to substantiate the theory is etymology. They trace linguistic patterns, encompassing East and West, and then by implication pinpoint a central geographic area which then serves as a common point of origin of the Indo-European language and race. This point, being basically the Caucasians and mountainous regions of Persia, is of course outside of India, such that the existence of the Aryan race in northern India is attributed to an invasion, and such is the explanation they offer for the Caucasian presence in India. It has often been pointed out that few other principal theories have ever been accepted based on such indirect, flimsy evidence. When something ends up being so rigidly imposed with such little basis, a reasonable mind will look for other motives. Again, we may rely on the broad understanding of David Frawley. It is important to examine the social and political implications of the Aryan invasion idea. First, it served to divide India into a northern Aryan